The revolution we've been waiting for, how Black women are rewriting business success through collective power. Thank you all for being here today. I'm truly honored to stand before you to share some extraordinary insights that have fundamentally shifted how I understand entrepreneurship, resilience, and community building. These revelations came through my recent conversation with Tina Brandon, a visionary whose work isn't just changing conversations, it's transforming entire economic ecosystems. Before I dive in, let me tell you about Tina. She isn't just a researcher or advocate, she's an architect of possibility. Her groundbreaking work has redirected millions in capital investment, restructured how major corporations approach diversity in their supply chains, and created pathways for thousands of women who were told they didn't belong in boardrooms and venture capital pitches. What makes Tina extraordinary isn't just her brilliance, it's her refusal to accept the world as it is and her relentless commitment to building the world as it should be. When I first encountered Tina's research, I expected to hear familiar narratives about barriers and challenges. Instead, what she shared turned everything I thought I knew completely upside down. Here's the provocative truth that Tina revealed. We've been telling the wrong story about Black women in business. And that wrong story hasn't just been incomplete, it's been actively harmful. The narrative we've all heard goes something like this: Black women face the steepest barriers in business: less funding, fewer connections, limited access to capital. All true. But here's what's astonishing and what the headlines consistently miss. Despite receiving significantly less support than their counterparts, Black women owned businesses have seen average revenues increase by 32.7% in recent years. Let that sink in for a moment. 32.7% growth. That's not just growth, that's growth that outpaces both the overall market and other demographic groups. Now, our first instinct might be to attribute this to exceptional individual grit, the twice as hard for half as much ethos that many Black women have had to embrace. But that explanation does something dangerous. It perpetuates the myth that the solution to structural inequality is simply for individuals to work harder. The truth Tina uncovered is far more revolutionary. This remarkable growth isn't primarily about individual heroics, it's about something far more disruptive: the building of collective infrastructure, networks of mentorship, capital access, and opportunity that are fundamentally changing how success looks for future generations of entrepreneurs. This is the first profound insight from Tina's research. Resilience doesn't just build character, it breeds innovation. The unique challenges faced by Black professionals and entrepreneurs often become catalysts for creative problem solving that reshapes entire industries. Let me take you to New Orleans after the pandemic threatened to wipe out small businesses there. A coalition of Black women entrepreneurs leveraged the Women's Business Enterprise National Council platform to connect with mentors and investors during a time when economic volatility threatened everything they'd built. These women faced formidable obstacles. Traditional banks wouldn't look at their loan applications. Their professional networks had been decimated by economic upheaval. The very communities they served were struggling to survive. But what did they do? Something that defies everything we're taught about American entrepreneurship. Rather than competing against each other for scarce resources, they built strategic alliances. They created peer mentoring groups where they shared proprietary information that most businesses guard jealously. They pooled marketing budgets to create digital platforms that elevated an entire community of businesses rather than individual brands. One of these women, a bakery owner named Jasmine, had lost 80% of her revenue overnight when tourism collapsed. Instead of focusing solely on rebuilding her own business, she initiated weekly strategy sessions where women across different industries, from retail to professional services, shared leads, resources, and opportunities. When a major hotel chain contract became available, rather than competing against each other, three of these businesses created a joint proposal that none could have secured alone. The results? Beyond that impressive 32.7% revenue increase, they expanded employment opportunities within local communities. Many of these founders had previously faced underemployment or business closures, but they joined forces to rebuild, not as individual enterprises, but as an ecosystem. Through bank certification programs, they secured new contracts with major corporations worth millions. And perhaps most significantly, their model inspired similar coalitions nationwide, focused on ecosystem building over solo entrepreneurship. This brings me to the second key insight from Tina's research: community over competition. The most successful Black women led ventures aren't built alone. They thrive through collaborative ecosystems where mentorship, shared resources, and collective advocacy drive sustainable growth for all involved. Consider a tech startup founded by a team of Black female engineers that scaled rapidly between 2019 and 2023. These women faced gender and race based bias from investors so severe that one venture capitalist actually told them, "I just don't see women like you succeeding in this space." They started with 90% less capital than comparable male led startups in the same sector. At major tech conferences, they were consistently mistaken for support staff rather than founders. Their response? They leveraged social media campaigns that showcased diverse leadership, reaching millions and creating visibility traditional channels denied them. They partnered with angel investment groups, specifically focused on minority founders, building relationships that traditional VC networks had blocked. And critically, they prioritized hiring diverse teams, not just as a moral imperative, but because they recognized the innovation benefits that come from varied perspectives. The founders had met at STEM diversity events after each experience being overlooked at previous employers. Their shared experience became a foundation for building something new, something that achieved 43% higher ROI than the industry average among comparable male led firms and expanded internationally within just 3 years. Their success helped shift investor attitudes towards seeing diversity as an asset rather than a risk factor across the tech sector. One investor who initially rejected them later admitted, "They showed us what we were missing by thinking too narrowly about what success looks like." Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something. These stories aren't about exceptional individuals who somehow overcame impossible odds through superhuman effort. That narrative, while inspiring on the surface, actually reinforces the very systems that create those odds in the first place. This brings me to the third key insight from Tina's research. Systemic change is not just necessary, it's possible. While disparities in funding and representation remain stark, Black founders start businesses at rates 22% lower than white peers. The gap is narrowing as more organizations focus on systemic solutions rather than individual achievements. A comprehensive analysis tracked national trends among venture capital backed startups run by Black female founders from 2019 to 2023. The challenges were substantial: persistent gaps in VC funding and accessibility, higher failure rates due to lack of early stage support structures, underrepresentation among general partners and investors perpetuating this cycle. But here's where things get interesting. Advocacy organizations campaigned successfully for targeted grant programs and dedicated venture funds supporting diverse founders. Accelerators tailored curriculum specifically around the unique barriers faced by underrepresented leaders. Perhaps most importantly, they created public accountability dashboards, tracking progress year over year so gaps could be measured transparently over time. The outcomes? Exit rates improved significantly among female founded VC backed startups, reaching 19.4%, even though they remained less likely overall compared with men run firms. Several high profile exits drew attention after years spent building credibility without traditional backing. These breakthrough moments sparked a broader movement toward equity focused investing. These efforts led to the creation and adoption of industry wide best practices around inclusive deal sourcing and evaluation processes, contributing directly toward narrowing the race and gender gap, not only through direct investment, but also via influence on policy and funding priorities nationally. What's particularly striking about these findings is how they challenge our fundamental assumptions about success and achievement. We've been conditioned to believe that business is inherently competitive, that for someone to win, someone else must lose. We've been taught that the path to success is individual, that it's about being the exceptional one who breaks through barriers through sheer force of will. But what if the opposite is true? What if the most sustainable path to success, particularly for those who have been systematically excluded, is actually through collaboration? What if the greatest competitive advantage isn't cutthroat individualism, but rather the ability to build and nurture communities of mutual support? This isn't just a nice theory. The data shows it's actually happening. And it's happening because Black women entrepreneurs have recognized something profound: that in a system that wasn't built for them, the most revolutionary act isn't trying to succeed within that system's constraints. It's building an entirely new system with different rules, different values, and different measures of success. So I stand before you today with a challenge to fundamentally rethink how we define success, how we build businesses, and how we create communities. Because the model that Black women entrepreneurs are building isn't just good for Black women, it's potentially transformative for all of us. Imagine a business world where collaboration creates more value than competition, where we measure success not just by individual wealth, but by community prosperity, where innovation flourishes because diverse perspectives aren't just included, they're centered. This isn't some utopian fantasy. It's happening right now, led by women who were told they didn't belong, who were denied resources, who were expected to fail, and who instead are building something revolutionary. So I ask you, how might your greatest obstacles become catalysts, not just for your own growth, but as stepping stones paving the way forward for others? What would change if you saw your success as inextricably linked to the success of your community? Today, I challenge you to take one bold step toward building not only your own legacy, but an ecosystem where collective success becomes inevitable. Whether that's mentoring someone who doesn't have access to your networks, investing in businesses led by those traditionally excluded, or simply rethinking how you measure success in your own organization. Because when we shift from seeing success as a zero sum game to recognizing it as something that grows exponentially when shared, we don't just change businesses, we change the world. Thank you.